normally what happens, you get inducted on Sunday afternoon and you go back to the Otisauga Hotel. They give you the Hall of Fame rings and they have a dinner with, just back then it would have been the league presidents and then the commissioner of baseball. So I actually got to go to that dinner before I got into the Hall of Fame. And Ted Williams grabbed a microphone, and Stan Musial, one of the great players of all time with, 3,630 hits, 1,815 at home and 1,815 on the road. I don't know how he ever figured that out or pulled that off. He had been ill, and Ted actually passed the microphone around, and everybody said how nice it was to see Stan back, and Yogi mentioned, it wasn't a scripted thing, but I got to see a little bit what it was like before I even did the induction of what it's like to be in the Hall of Fame. Obviously it's a select group of players, but they also, because of the history and the fact that, they played against each other, a lot of them, were mortal enemies in a sense. If you played for the Yankees, you wanted to beat the Red Sox, et cetera, et cetera. So we got a little glimpse of it. So it made the induction speak even a little bit more difficult.
That was Orioles legend Jim Palmer talking about when he realized how special it was going to be as a member of the National Baseball Hall of Fame. Hello and welcome to episode 75 of the Irish Baseball Podcast. I'm your host, Rick Becker. Jim Palmer was a member of the 2023 class of the Irish American Baseball Hall of Fame, so I thought it would be fun to go back to 2021 and listen to his interview with Shaun Clancy. Of course, when Shaun was running the legendary Irish pub Foley's in New York City, he created the Irish American Baseball Hall of Fame, and now he has brought it to the Irish American Baseball Society. He will cover a number of topics with the Orioles great, who is never at a loss for words. Take it away, Shaun.
Hi, I'm Shaun Clancy. Welcome to Crack and the Bat, which is a little interview section that we do for the Irish American Baseball Society. The Irish American Baseball Society is a society of Irish people who love baseball and baseball people who love Ireland. And I am delighted to be joined today by Hall of Famer Jim Palmer. Jim, thank you for taking the time to do this with us.
Well, you're welcome. My pleasure, actually.
And I want to also thank our good friend Rick Vaughan, who set this up. Rick's a good friend. I don't know if you knew this. Did you know that, now I know that you threw a no-hitter in 1969. You know that Rick threw a no-hitter in college?
No.
Yes. He doesn't, he's very shy about stuff like that, but yeah, he actually has, I actually have the baseball, the last out from the game with George Mason. So, there's something that you guys share. So, so much we want to talk about, but the funny thing was, last week, our last interview was with Jack O'Connell, who is secretary of the baseball writers, and he has the wonderful job of calling you to tell you've been inducted in the Hall of Fame. When you got inducted back in 1990, I believe?
Yes.
It was Jack Lang, and I believe there's a funny story there, because I happened to mention it to Rick. I said, God, I must ask Jim if he remembers, the phone call. He says, don't.
What? So, No, I had a friend who said, he owned a restaurant. He said, listen, I want to have people over because, you're going to get in the Hall of Fame. And I had talked to Jack Lang, and he said, listen, I can't tell you whether you got in the Hall of Fame or not. But he said, where are you going to be between 7 and 8 o'clock? And I said, I really don't know. So as it turned out, I'm sure the Orioles told him that I was going to be at Hirsch's Orchard Inn was my friend's restaurant. So we go over there, and Jack had said, listen, you did win 3 Cy Youngs. You did win more games in the 70s than anybody else. So you kind of dominated your era. But I can't tell you you're getting into the Hall of Fame. So it gets to be about 8:45. And my stepson, BJ, says, Jim, it's not looking very good because it said they call it between 7 and 8. Somebody had told Jack in the Hall of Fame that I was at a crab place that was actually closed in the winter. So it took them an extra hour or so and finally Jack called and I answered the phone and he said, I have bad news and I have good news. He said, the bad news, 33 writers didn't vote for you. The good news, 411 did. So, because I told my friend, I said, what if I don't get in? He said, well, we'll do it next year. I said, well, this is going to get expensive. So as it turned out, Joe Morgan and I got in 1990 and terrific player, won 2 MVPs. It's funny when you do the induction, Shaun, he spoke first, but, he passed away last summer. And but for the next 20 years, 25 years, he said, "Thank God you spoke first." I said, "Joe, you spoke first." So you do get a little nervous, and the other thing that happened, during the induction, that July was that we had a rain delay. In other words, they couldn't do it on Sunday, so we did it. We're going to do it again on Monday, but it was raining just as hard, and we did it in a little gymnasium. So, and then the night before, I actually, normally what happens, you get inducted on Sunday afternoon, and you go back to the Otissaga Hotel. They give you the Hall of Fame rings, and they have a dinner with back then it would have been the league presidents and then the commissioner of baseball. So I actually got to go to that dinner before I got into the Hall of Fame. And Ted Williams grabbed a microphone, and Stan Musial, one of the great players of all time with, 3,630 hits, 1,815 at home and 1,815 on the road. I don't know how he ever figured that out or pulled that off. He had been ill, and Ted actually passed the microphone around, and everybody said how nice it was to see Stan back, and Yogi mentioned, it wasn't a scripted thing, but I got to see a little bit what it was like before I even did the induction of what it's like to be in the Hall of Fame. That, obviously it's a select group of players, but they also, because of the history and the fact that, they played against each other, a lot of them, were mortal enemies in a sense. If you played for the Yankees, you wanted to beat the Red Sox, et cetera, et cetera. So we got a little glimpse of it. So it made the induction speak even a little bit more difficult.
I was thinking about that. I was going to ask you about that because going in 1990, so many of what are now considered the immortals were still alive. Like you mentioned, Musial and Ted Williams, and I mean, obviously, I think DiMaggio and those guys. I don't know if they were there, but they were alive. I mean, now, so you grew up in Manhattan, moved to California. Did you root for a particular team?
Oh, I was a Yankee fan.
So who was your idol?
Well, whoever hit a home run on Saturday, the game of the week, which, could have been Mickey Mantle or it could have been John Blanchard. Seemed like he hit a home run every Saturday. He was a backup catcher and, left-handed pull hitter in Yankee Stadium. It's 296 down the line in the old stadium and, 305, I think, or 301 down the left field line. But it went to 461 or 3 in center field with flagpoles. And that's where the original Monument Park was. I saw Pepitone hit a ball 462 feet. And it was the triple. Yeah. And I saw Andy Etchebarren, my rookie year in 1965, hit a ball up the gap. Roy White, who played the deepest left field in the history of left fields because it was 457 to the power alley. Etch hit a ball up the gap and got it inside the park home run. Bill Stafford actually threw it. He threw the ball over my head the next pitch, but he didn't last long. So I had come in relief in that ball game. So yeah, Yankee Stadium. I went there. My dad took me there on the if you ever saw City Slickers, remember when Billy Crystal talks about they're out in the middle of New Mexico and he's with his buddy and Jack Palance is the trail boss. And he says, "Tell me about your greatest day ever." And Billy talks about 1955 when his dad took him to Yankee Stadium. It was before color television. Well, I went in 1954 and it had rained. It was a Tuesday night and the Yankees were playing the Indians, who broke my heart because they won the most games ever that year. I think they won 100 and maybe 11 games, something like that. I think that was eventually the Mariners won more and maybe the Yankees one year. But so, he talked about going to Yankee Stadium. Well, I went on that Tuesday night and it rained. And when you walk through the tunnel before color television, you really have no idea how green the grass is, so I kind of had a love affair, not only with the Yankee Stadium. I was 30-16 against the Yankees, a lifetime. I always wanted to be a Yankee. It's funny when I retired, George Steinbrenner actually sent me a letter congratulating me and, for the rivalry and whatever. And I'd love to go to Yankee Stadium as a kid. I went to the Polo Grounds, never made Ebbets Field, because this was, if you were born in 1945 and so you were, 8 or 9, in the early 50s, seemed like it was the Yankees and the Dodgers in every World Series. They only won the 1 year, I think, in 1955. And the irony is, Don Larson actually was on the Orioles when I got there in 1965, and he pitched a perfect game in 1956. And when I moved to California, as you mentioned, between geography and history, you had that little transistor radio you put up on your ear, and you'd see how the Yankees were doing. And I was a Yankee fan, and I always wanted to play for the Yankees, but and I was a year before the draft, so I could have signed with anybody. And my mom was in Las Vegas because we lived in, Scottsdale, Phoenix area. And she went to Las Vegas, and one of the Yankee scouts tapped her on the shoulder. She said, "We're going to sign your son." And you know what? I guess I ended up coming back from South Dakota, where I went to a college league. I was the only high school player in that league. And we had a car crash on the way back. The guy driving my car fell asleep. We rolled the car 3 times, demolished it. I cut my knee. He cut his arm. We jumped in. We had a couple of our teammates behind us jumped in the car, and I ended up signing that night. The next day, 10 teams called. Wow. So I'm sure one of them was the Yankees, but I ended up signing with the Orioles, and turned out, 6 World Series and all those playoffs turned out to be a pretty good decision.
So the $50,000 that you got from the Orioles helped to get
40,000. That's 40,000. Seemed like 50. When
you're 17, everything you read on Wikipedia. Well, actually, that was something I was going to ask you about. So, you grew up in Manhattan. You moved to LA. You moved to Scottsdale, and then you go to, was it Pheasant?
The Aberdeen Pheasants.
What was South Dakota like?
Well, I'd already played when I played American Legion ball when I was a junior. So my senior year, I go 10-0. I pitched 5 no-hitters. And I led the state in scoring in basketball, caught 65 passes. I was a pretty good all-around athlete. So I had a lot of options. I could have gone to UCLA. ASU actually had a better basketball team in 1963 than the Bruins, who would go on with John Wooden to win all those national championships. So I loved basketball. I threw so hard. I was a good hitter. I got astigmatism, so I couldn't wear glasses and pitch. So my hitting kind of went downhill because I thought I was going to be an outfielder. But so Bobby Winkles was the coach at ASU, and he said, "You need to go to a college league up in South Dakota with 4 of our players. Now you got to make the team." So I went up there at 17. I was the only high school player. Bobby Floyd was a shortstop out of UCLA. He actually played shortstop in that. I pitched my no-hitter. He was on our team. Merv Rettenman, who had a long career, he was from Ball State. He played the outfield and caught. Carl Morton would win 18 games. He was a right fielder, but later on he pitched with the Montreal Expos. And Jim Lombard, who 4 years later would win a Cy Young Award, was on our team from Stanford. But I was the only high school player, so I made the team. I did pretty well, and so I knew what South Dakota was about. People were fabulous. Winter was even a smaller town than Aberdeen. Aberdeen I think Pierre might have been the capital, but it was a small town. I played for Cal Ripken Sr. And it's interesting, you asked that question because we had a really good team. We won 14 straight games down in Thomasville, Georgia, where our spring training was, about 45 miles from Tallahassee. And we beat Earl Weaver's AA team all over the ballpark. So we won 14 in a row in spring training, 25 out of the first 29 games. But opening day, we're out on the field. It can get pretty chilly, in April, and we didn't have a lot of clothes. You had a thin sweatshirt. You might have had a little nylon jacket, and it's 38, 40 degrees. And we're sitting on, out in the outfield, and he pointed at the empty stands, and Cal said, "Listen, the only reason we're here is because of the people that are going to come see us play." He said, "We're going to come to the ballpark every day and never let anybody outwork us. The other thing we're going to do is we're going to come to the ballpark every day and get a little bit better collectively because we all want to go to the next level." I was in high A, I guess they would call it now. Northern League was the highest of the 3 4 minor league teams, A-ball teams the Orioles had. So, and he said, we're going to have fun, which means we're going to win. And the other thing is there are no such things as shortcuts. And think about that. This is you're 18 years old. You're making $414 after you pay your taxes. You're living in a basement. When it rained, your shoes would float to the corner because it flooded. $3 a day meal money, 10, 12, 14-hour bus rides. But you want to play in the big leagues. That's your dream. So you're willing to do anything. And, Cal was the greatest. He had been a young catcher, hurt his shoulder, and he got into coaching. And we know what his son did. Cal's Jr. played 2,632 consecutive games. And they always said, there was Billy Ripken and Cal Jr. that played for the Orioles and played in the big leagues. And every time Cal Sr. would do a coaching thing or, what do you call them? On the weekends, he would do where he'd go out and show people. It's a clinic of sorts. Cal Jr., because he never saw his dad, would go with him. And I'm sure that had a lot to do with the fact that, Cal understood how you need to play the game. I'm talking about his son, who ended up in the Hall of Fame with over 400 home runs and 3,000 hits. So, yeah, I couldn't think of having a better manager. And then, of course, he would come to the Orioles and be a third base coach and kind of be a confidant for the rest of my career.
But Rick Vaughn has said that when he was with the Orioles, that PR guy, he would get there pretty much before the players would, and he would get there, and Cal Senior would be lathered in sweat because he had basically manicured the infields himself
Well, he did everything. The Orioles came to see us in Aberdeen, and it was a big deal. I mean, the Major League Club come to high A, and it was rain in the forecast. So Cal Senior went to a retread tire place and got, we didn't have a tarp. If it rained, usually the game would be rained out. He got tarps from the hardware store. He got tires. So when it rained, they put the tarps out on the infield so you could play, so you would keep it dry, and then he put the tires on it. And, when the rain stopped, the game started, and, we ended up playing. I got to see Milt Pappas and Steve Barber, the first 20-game winner for the Orioles pitch. And, it was an amazing thing. But, and then I would they said, do you want to go to the major leagues? Because we may have to keep you on the roster, in 1965. This was the year after I'd been in Aberdeen, South Dakota. I said, sure. He said, well, you need to go to instructional league. So who was my manager down in instructional league? Cal Ripken Sr. So he really had a lot to, he taught me, along with George Maverick, who was a terrific pitching coach, taught me to throw the ball low and away to right-handed batters. And if you can do that, you can throw the ball anywhere. You got to have the perfect windup to do it. I was listening to a Zoom from Jacob deGrom, and all the writers are going, wow, you threw 4 balls, 99 to 102 miles per hour. And he said, I don't care about velocity. I care the fact that I threw the ball low and away. And baseball is going to get back to that. We got all the analytics and whatever, but at the end of the day, if you don't have a good windup, I met Max Scherzer after he left Arizona, went to the Tigers, and talking to Verlander, who I met when I spoke at he went to Old Dominion. I'd been down there, so I met him when he was a junior in college, and he introduced me to him, and he said, do you have any suggestions? I said, well, just be able to repeat your windup with your stuff. It will never be easy, but it'll be less difficult. And then, last night pitched a whale of a game, gave up the 1 home run. It kind of reminded me, I'm sitting there watching that game and I'm thinking, Vida Blue, as good as Vida was, he won 209 games. The only game he won in the postseason was a game I lost 1-0. He pitched the 2-hitter, I pitched a complete game, and Sal Bando hit a 4th inning home run, and that was the difference in the game. And so all home runs can, you never figure they're going to beat you. But last night, and the Dodgers hadn't lost a game in Dodger Stadium since August 29th.
For Shaun Clancy, founder of the Irish American Baseball Hall of Fame, and Jim Palmer, member of the Irish American Baseball Hall of Fame's 2023 class, I'm Rick Becker. This has been episode 75 of the Irish Baseball Podcast. Happy Thanksgiving to all of our listeners in the United States.